So as can be seen in these time-lapse images, Panope has a tendency to yaw at anchor. Now the reason this happens, in a nutshell, is because her above waterline structures are centered sort of in the forward part of the boat. In this case, it's mostly the main mast up there. Simultaneously, or at the same time, the below waterline structures like the keel, rudder, and running gear, that's centered more toward the aft part of the boat. And it's sort of like trying to get an arrow to fly through the air backwards. It just doesn't happen. It wants to swap ends with the feathers at the back of the boat. And the only reason that's keeping the head anywhere near pointed into the wind is because there is an anchor chain attached up there. But that's what we're fighting. The boat's trying to turn downwind, and the anchor chain is trying to turn upwind, and you get this oscillation as a result. Now, there are several well-known remedies you can employ that are very simple, and I've tried all of them, namely a bridle on the anchor, which did virtually nothing, having a snubber off to the side, so it's sort of a lopsided anchor attach point. That didn't do anything either, other than to just center the oscillation off to one side. I've also played around with second anchors, and that gets a little more complicated. You have to tend these as the tide goes up and down, and if the wind shifts, you have to reset them altogether. So I was looking for a solution that was a bit more carefree once it was deployed, and my idea is to add a mizzen to the vessel. So as you can see here, the mainmast is well forward, and that pilot house aft was never enough to sort of act like arrows on a feather. So I've decided to add a mizzen. You can see the design here. I've also got a redesign for the dinghy davit. It's kind of a combination unit. Got the radar on there, and antennas and lights. I felt it could also be useful under sail with real short sail. Anyway, here's a down view shot showing the proposed sheeting arrangement. Here's the original davit that I built many years ago. It was never designed to carry a sail, but it does pivot nicely. So I've already got mast partners that will allow for a pivoting mast. This is going to be a little different. There's not too many yawl rigs that have a pivoting self or freestanding mast. Here you can see how it is pivotable. I mainly built it to pivot originally so that it could have shorter overall length for the vessel and therefore have less expensive dock and other harbor fees. Now this was a really useful dinghy davit arrangement, as you can see, and I'm going to lose some of that utility, but as you'll see, I will retain the ability to use the mast as a dinghy davit. So here I'm going to show you a few minutes of clips of the construction of this new mast. I'll shut up here and just let this roll. This is a South Bend lathe built in 1936, and I picked it up on Craigslist for next to nothing. I did give it a kind of a quickie overhaul, and it was very useful to make some of the collars and sleeves that I needed for the mizzen project. So rather than bolting the mast control arm collar to the mast, I am gluing it to the mast. It only has to handle rotation loads, and if it does break free, it's not the end of the world. I'll just probably end up bolting it at that point. And the reason to avoid bolts or screws or rivets is I just want to maintain full strength of this freestanding mast. This collar does occur roughly at the partners, which is the point of maximum load. So it turns out the sail from this Glen L10 that I built as a young teenager, it's large enough to be cut down and be used as a test sail for the new mizzen. Now, I'm not a sail maker, so I just used duct tape and household needle and thread to make up the reinforcements, but that should be good enough for some testing. I'll mention that Glen L10 did donate other parts of itself for other projects of mine. Here's an airplane that I built, and the floats needed spreader bars, or the tubes that span in between the floats horizontally. That is the mast from that Glen L10. Okay, so here's the new mizzen mounted very strongly in my pickup truck, and yep, I'm doing poor man's wind tunnel testing. I wanted to verify that this freestanding mast was going to be able to hold up to about 40 knots of wind, so I'm driving the truck up and down with the sail set at an angle of attack. What we can see here is there's two poles. The closest pole is stationary via those two strings up there, and then the mast, you can see it's deflecting off to the right now. And we're doing close to the 35, 40 knots, and I was satisfied that the strength of that freestanding mast was going to be adequate up to those speeds, and then it was time to launch the boat and just put all this together and see how it worked. So as soon as I took this photograph and looked at it, I kind of had an epiphany, and that was that a sailing dinghy could be set in a davit like this with its sail pointed aft with respect to the mothership, and that would probably work as an anchor riding sail. Maybe that's a project for another time. So with everything looking good at the dock, it was time to go out on a windy day and give this very tiny mizzen a test. Winds at this point are about 15 knots, which is not too much, but the boat is consistently yawing between 50 and 60 degrees. You'll see as soon as I get this mizzen hoisted and sheeted amidships, the yawing virtually stops. It goes to, maybe 5 degrees with an occasional 10-degree swing, and I gotta believe that some of that is probably the result of just some small temporary wind shifts that occur pretty regularly. So here we are, we're sheeted up nicely amidships, and you keep an eye on the horizon there, and it just doesn't move. Here I'm dragging out a head sail from down below and just placing it up in the wind stream on the foredeck, just to add some area up there to see if I could defeat the stability of this that the mizzen is providing, and nothing could make it yaw again. I could go up there and stand broadside of the wind on the foredeck with other items, and nope, that mizzen is virtually 100% here. It's just totally tame. I did get up to about a maximum of 20 knots of wind, maybe gusts 25. Same result. Just perfect in my view. We can see here the mizzen is, quote, tacking back and forth slightly, and it just doesn't spend much time luffing or in irons. It just goes from one tack to the next, and it just immediately just solves the problem. Here I am striking the sail, and just instantly we see the head of the boat just starting to wander back and forth nonstop. So the primary goal of this mizzen project was to control the yawing at anchor. However, any benefits that occur under sail, well, that's a bonus. I'll mention that under full sail, with full working sail, this mizzen being so tiny is only contributing a very small percentage and is almost not really noticeable. But as the sails are reefed down, such as in this case with staysail and reefed main, it starts to come into effect or become usable, and it really comes into its own under very short sail. Here with storm jib and trysail, the mizzen is a significant portion of the total sail area. Of course, being so far aft, it acts almost like another rudder or trim tab, and I can sort of tune or tailor the amount of helm I have. It really works well in the higher winds. It self-tends, or during tacks and jibes, it doesn't require any attention. And again, very, very pleased. It's the kind of thing that I will hoist when I leave a marina during cruising and just leave it up 100% of the time. It'll be up motoring, sailing, fishing, anchoring, of course, you name it. Just leave it up and forget it. And I think it'll work out just great. I'll finish up by mentioning that I am not the first person to add a mizzen to a gaff sloop. This is Josh Slocum's Spray, and he added this mizzen at the beginning of his epic round-the-world journey back in the late 1800s.